If any member of the public wishes to speak to the council on any item, go ahead and raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or come forward if you're in the room. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period and move on to our first work session, which is the Dallin Diversion Project. And I don't know who is going to go ahead and lead off this discussion.
Mayor, I thought the city manager was going to do an introduction, but we do have Mabel Jones with us and Justin from WWC. So excellent. I know they're prepared to give the presentation tonight as well.
Great. Well, welcome to both of you. Thanks for taking time to join us and give us an update on this project. I think the council is pretty interested in an update here. And I don't know if one of you is interested in taking it from here, but I would sure welcome you to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to lead it.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. We can't hear anyone in the chambers there.
Can you hear us now, Justin?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect. I think we just were muted. Story as old as time. So we are... We're on the work session with you all, and we're going to hop right into it. If there's one of you that is interested in taking this, or the city manager is here, she can go ahead and get us started. So disregard all of that. We're going to go to the city manager, and we'll be right back with you.
Hi, Mayor, and I apologize for joining you a few minutes late. I assume you're hoping for me to kick off this work session, yes? Very good.
That is correct. You're right on time.
All right, thank you. I got my head down and working and lost track of time. Welcome, and you've noted that we have a number of folks joining us for this presentation tonight. We're going to be talking to you about the Dallin Ditch Headgate, which is really well past its useful life, and the city recognized the need to rehabilitate that headgate structure a number of years ago. As part of doing our due diligence to understand the options for rehabilitating that piece of infrastructure, we came to understand that the Wyoming Game and Fish also have designated that structure as an impediment to fish habitat migrating up and down the river. And so we launched a level 1 study, I believe it was completed in 2016, to evaluate the best direction to move forward to rehab that piece of infrastructure. We've been working with WWC, Justin Turfaher. I hope I've said your last name correctly, Justin. But he is going to join us tonight and actually walk us through a presentation of the second phase of our planning effort following that level 1 in 2016 or 17, which is a level 2 study, which we've just completed and is in draft form. Also, we've been working with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Steve Gale, and Mabel Jones has been our project manager at the Wyoming Water Development Office. And these folks have just been a great team to work with. I think you'll be best informed if I step aside and let Justin walk you through kind of the problem and also the solutions identified in the level 2 study and the preferred alternative. And then the reason we wanted to be in front of you tonight was to bring you up to speed on where we're at. I know you're aware of the project, but we will be entering into the public phase where we'll be seeking some public information and feedback and having a public meeting. And then on July 18th, in about a month, we're going to be in front of you guys with a resolution of support. So this is to bring the public up to speed and our elected officials, and really just an informational session tonight with no need for feedback or really any direction from you.
Is there a level 3? Is there a next level to this as well?
Yes,
Okay.
and I believe the PowerPoint will kind of talk about next steps after we get past the all the appropriate steps for level 2. So with that, Justin, thank you for being here, and I guess I will turn the PowerPoint over to you. The clerk has that, and we can project it and walk through it.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you for being here, Justin. We once we have the presentation up, I'll let you know. And you can just ask the city clerk to advance it unless you have control that I don't know about.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thanks to the city council and city staff for all the help on this project and staying involved and engaged, and we definitely appreciate that involvement, and it's led us to where we're at today. And so today we'll go through the level 2 study. We've basically completed the project. We're in the final phases of getting public comment on a draft report, as well as the findings of the level 2 study. And so with that, I think we can go to the next slide. And so again, this was a WWDC funded study. They paid for 100% of the level 2. We kicked off the project in May of 2022. We're anticipating completion in August of 2023, so just here in a couple short months. And really what this level 2 study was focused on was rehabilitation recommendations for the diversion itself and how the city can maintain that diversion into the future, and then what that cost will be through various grant programs, and ultimately what that might cost the city, and culminated in a draft report which lays out all of our thought process, involvement through project stakeholders. We'll go through those stakeholders here in a little bit, and ultimately the final recommendations. So next slide, please. So the Dallin diversion is located on now city-owned property to the southwest of Laramie. You can see in the bottom left corner of this photo, we have a little pin mark on the Dallin diversion dam itself, and then kind of all the green area heading towards the city of Laramie. Most of that is irrigated by the Dallin diversion. And so this particular diversion supports a lot of acreage currently for agricultural use. 95% of the water from this diversion is the city of Laramie's water now, with the recent Bath Ranch purchase. And so the ditch irrigates the Bath Ranch, or the previous Bath Ranch, the Monolith Ranch, which the city also owns. And then at the very end of the ditch, there's one private user on the ditch that has a pretty minority share on the overall infrastructure. So next slide, please. So what's the purpose of this diversion? Currently, it's to irrigate approximately 36 cubic feet per second, or CFS, which is about 16,200 gallons per minute. So in an acreage, that's thousands of acres of irrigated land that the city primarily operates, applies that water to ground, as shown in the previous slide, and then the one private ranch. And really, the purpose for the city owning this irrigation diversion is for a future municipal use transfer. And so the city will take that water that's currently allocated for agricultural use and do some petitions through the state engineer's office and move it to municipal use. That transfer is likely at least 20 years away from now, if not longer. That depends on a lot of factors like future groundwater development, city use. A lot more efficient appliances and fixtures are in the city, and so the use has actually gone down or stabilized. But this amount of water at current use could allow the city to at least double in size. So it is a very large amount of water and a big asset for the city. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for this transfer to come through, the city needs to prove use of that water right. And so the use that they need to prove is through agriculture. And so maintaining this dam as an agricultural diversion is very important for that future transfer. Next slide, please. And so just to show, part of our work was to map out all of the irrigated lands under the ditch. So generally speaking, the ditch starts on the bottom left of the page, kind of where the green area starts, and follows around to the east. So the bottom of the page, and then starts working its way north towards the city. The green areas are where the city is doing a really nice job irrigating. Those are where we have water rights attached to ground. The red areas are where we have water rights, but it's hard ground to irrigate. And so those are areas that we've identified for the city to possibly consider moving or doing other water right exercises to better shore up some of those areas. And then there is some yellow areas, very, very minor, where water rights are not attached to the ground, but it is irrigated. This type of mapping, I will say the city's done a really good job over the years of getting more green and less red. And I think if you mapped a lot of districts across the state, you would see that overall this ditch is in really good shape from a water rights standpoint. Next slide, please. So as we started looking at the overall goals and objectives of the project, we prioritized goals. And so the number one priority is that irrigation water diversion. And under that priority one goal, we identified a bunch of objectives, such as when to make diversions, how much, how to operate the dam, and a lot of details related to the irrigation infrastructure and how it's operated by city staff. Priority two goals, these are important goals to the project, but not our number one focus, but they are number two. So we took them very seriously. And those included fish passage, as Janine mentioned. Public access in the future, it's likely public will have access to this site. And so building a project, knowing public can access a facility, how do we keep it safe? How do we keep it protected? And then the overall aesthetics of the project, we want to make sure that whatever we build there is a nice asset for the city, not only from a water rights standpoint, but also promotes, a nice looking and feeling project. Another goal is wetland preservation. Currently, this dam does support a lot of wetlands upstream and downstream of the dam and around the ditch. And so preserving those wetlands helps us bring in additional stakeholders to the project and is good for aquatic and riparian habitats. The priority three goals are kind of our least priority goals, but something we still considered. One is floater passage. There's a possibility in the future that this stretch of river could see an increased floater passage. So we want to make sure if we build a dam that we're not building a safety hazard to floaters or giving floaters access around the dam. The current dam has some impacts to adjacent property. One of those is not owned by the city. And working with that landowner, we've identified a solution or at least a process for making sure we don't increase those impacts to his property. Next slide, please. So this is an overall picture of the diversion. So the river flows from kind of left to right up to the top of the page. The dam itself is where you can kind of see that white water right on the left side if you're looking downstream of the river. And then over on the right-hand side next to the berm is where the city actually makes their diversion off the river. One thing I'll point out is the river in this area, the bankful width, which is a term which designates kind of how wide the river is, it's approximately 100 feet wide. And this dam, as it sits today, is 40 feet wide. And so that can create issues with sediment as well as fish passage. Next slide, please. So looking at the diversion, kind of how it's operated, just to give everyone a brief overview, is the gates you can see there on the right are raised and lowered by city staff as the water level in the river needs to be increased to push water down the ditch. And so those gates are at least 50 to 70 years old. We're kind of unsure how old. There's a rickety walkway that city staff need to get on and open and close those gates. In addition, the configuration of those gates does also create that fish barrier. Next slide, please. And so part of in doing this project, the city did city staff raised some concerns of safety. Because of the style of gates there, when large trees and wood come down the river, which they do every single year, they get hung up on these gates and city staff go out with chainsaws and try and cut them out. And that operation in itself can be pretty dangerous. You can see the river At this time upstream, it looks like a nice calm pool, but immediately around those gates and downstream, it's very turbulent and a very big safety hazard. So keeping city staff away from the dam during floods is something we incorporated into the design. Next slide. So now the intake itself, again, the intake is kind of on the right-hand side or kind of the center of the picture. And the photo on the right shows those two slide gates. Those gates are shop fabricated, so they leak really bad. It's hard for the city to turn them off, and when they turn them on, it's hard to regulate flows down those through those gates, as well as a lot of sediment and sticks and debris get hung up in this configuration. So one of our goals was to try and make operation and maintenance of this point of diversion a lot simpler, where gates can be raised and lowered in a lot easier manner, and keeping that diversion record, which is so important for the transfer of water in the future. So thank you. Fish Passage. Not only is this a managed trout fishery by Game and Fish, you can see the big brown trout there on the left. There's also a lot of small-bodied fish in this system: brassy minnow, common shiner, Iowa darter, as well as a list of maybe 10 or 12 others. But these are kind of the primary targets. They're the species of greatest conservation need. And so through the project, we looked at how do we pass these fish. Brown trout are actually pretty easy. They're fast swimmers. They can swim over pretty big obstacles. But these little fish that are 3-4 inches long, they're really hard to get over structures. So that was definitely a design challenge. Next slide. So we gave a presentation to City Council back in December, where we presented 3 different alternatives that we were evaluating for consideration. And just to let everyone know, those three alternatives were evaluated with the whole stakeholder team, including the city, Game and Fish, Water Development, Fish and Wildlife Service, the local conservation district, Trout Unlimited. We used all of their input, as well as the project goals and objectives, to rank these projects. And ultimately, a rock ramp with technical fishway was selected. The photo on the right shows a rock ramp over by Encampment, Wyoming, that allows for fish passage and also irrigation diversion. So just kind of an example photo. Let's go to the next slide. And so ultimately, this is a plan view of what we designed for the site. One thing I want to point out is that overall dam width is quite a bit wider, and it has a rock ramp below it. So that rock ramp will allow fish passage during certain times of the year, as well as floater passage when flows are high enough. The intake, you can see through the photo where the previous concrete's located and how we're scooting it out a little bit closer to the natural flow of the river. That'll really help with sediment and debris buildup. We're adding a floating debris boom to kind of help capture some of that woody debris coming down the river and send it over the main section of the dam. And then on the north bank, or the top side of the page, is our technical fish ladder, which will be a hybrid of a technical fish ladder and rock ramp. That'll allow fish passage during the irrigation season. There are times when the city actually needs to turn off fish passage and take most of the river in the water to meet that water right requirement. And this solution will allow the city to do that. Although working through the math and city experience, we're pretty sure that fish passage can occur out here maybe 4 out of 5 or 7 out of 10 years. So quite a high percentage of the years. Next slide. This just is a little detail, and I won't go into too much detail on it, but one cool thing we're incorporating into this dam, hydraulically, it's very equivalent to the existing dam. The existing dam has those slide gates that can go up and down, and this new solution will allow kind of that same function where during the winter we can really lower the water surface and reduce impacts on the neighbor during the winter, and then in the summer our impacts will be the same or less. And so ultimately we're not making conditions worse upstream of the project. And in some cases, we're making it better. So I think this solution will really help city staff reduce in-channel maintenance, keep folks out of the river, especially during high floods, and allow for a more reliable irrigation diversion that'll help shore up that water transfer. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just a few components on the left. The photo on the left is of Obermeyer weirs. They're kind of a cool design that are made down in Wellington, Colorado. So the manufacturer's close to home and will allow us to raise and lower the dam from the dam bank, opposed to doing it in the river as city staff have to now. And so those are big steel plates with inflatable bladders below them. You pump them full of air. They have little standpipes that hold them up long term, and they're a nice solution. Game and Fish operates these. Other irrigation districts operates this around the state with good success. The middle photo shows an irrigation diversion on the encampment with a floating debris boom, as well as a trash rack. Both of those components will be added to the city and really help reduce that routine cleaning and maintenance where the city needs to bring equipment out and clean in front of their head gates. And then the photo on the right shows construction of that same structure, but these big round slide gates, the city is going to have 3 of those now, and that'll really allow for fine flow control down the ditch. And they're really a nice long-term solution for diverting water. Next slide. So the project cost estimate, the total cost estimate for the project is around $2.4 million. This cost estimate follows the WWDC project formatting cost. And so it includes everything from professional services such as design work, all the permitting, all the materials and construction. It also includes a 15% contingency and an inflation factor. So the details of everything that it takes to build the dam are in that table on the right. But ultimately, let's go to the next slide. So throughout this project, we've engaged project stakeholders such as Game and Fish, Laramie Rivers Conservation District, the NRCS, Trout Unlimited, Fish and Wildlife Service, and all of these folks have helped us with input on the project, how to accommodate fish passage, how to consider wetlands. And then ultimately what these partners bring is that funding package and help us get this built because we are accommodating floater passage, fish passage, wetland preservation. Some of those key components also lead to the city's hopefully contribution of about 10% or less of the project. And so let's go to the next slide. This was a table from our report that outlines a couple different scenarios. And so it looked at if the city needed to pay for this outright, what that cost would be to the city on an annual basis with a loan for a 30-year period. Then we looked at the traditional WWDC funding where the city takes out a loan for a third of the project, where WWDC covers 2/3 of the project, and that still results in a fairly large loan payment for the city for the next quite a few years. And then that third scenario, which is really what we're pushing, and I think through other projects we've been successful using this funding approach. And so that's bringing in partners such as the NRCS with a cost share of $450,000, Fish and Wildlife Service for $50,000, Game and Fish for $50,000, Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust for maybe $400,000, and ultimately bringing all of this funding together, we can get the city's contribution down to about $200,000 for the entire project. And just a few years ago, when we kicked the project off, the city had already set aside about $75,000 just to do routine maintenance around the dam. And so the city has held off on that maintenance, and maybe those funds could be transferred to the current project in front of us. And then ultimately, a really big funding partner is Wyoming Water Development Commission. their funding contribution would probably be in that 50 to 67% range. So they're definitely one of our major funding partners. Next slide. So kind of here's our implementation schedule. This level 2 study that we're presenting tonight is going to be completed in August. On July 11th, we are having the final public hearing and presentation of the project and our findings. That'll be held at the City Rec Center. We're coordinating with city staff to make that happen, and WWDC actually completes the advertising for that meeting. And so on the 11th, we'll hear any comments from the public. But in the meantime, our draft report is available at the city for public review, and that'll be at the city until July 25th. And so any comments from the public are due back to us by July 25th. And then ultimately, we will have a resolution to City Council to approve the study and its findings. From there, we'd like to move, assuming the City Council would like to kick this project forward, we'd like to apply for a level 3 WWDC project, and that's due the first part of September. And so a separate resolution would be needed by the City Council to apply for that level 3 kind of final design, construction, implementation project. Level 3 would kick off in a perfect world next May or June, and hopefully we could get to construction by summer, fall of 2025. In the meantime, the city has worked with some of our funding partners, such as NRCS, has an application in for funding to see if the city's eligible. And so some of these funding partners are being engaged early and often to hopefully lead to that successful funding package. Next slide. I think with that, that's all we have prepared for tonight. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you for that, Justin. Council members, do you have any questions for either WWC or the WWDC? Or the city manager? Have at it. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Justin, when Darren was with the city, he took several council members, including myself, out there a couple of years ago and gave us a tour of the whole facility. And he had some really big concerns at that time, and that was a couple of years ago. So still looking at construction a couple of years down the road, how do you see all of this coming together or holding together until that time?
Yeah, so the city has actively, thank you for your question. The city has actively been improving parts and pieces of the diversion, as well as some of the laterals on the Bath Ranch that was acquired. And so I think as we move forward, the city might have some routine maintenance required in the next couple of years. But I think the hope is not to do anything major until this formal project can be implemented.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions, Council? Yeah, Councilor Pierce, please.
Yeah, in terms of our budget, I was just going back through the budget to see, I'm assuming it's the roughly 200 or 250,000 is in there for the phase 2? And what do we think phase 3 cost?
I'm happy to take that, and maybe, Nancy, we could go back to the budget slide. So the $200,000 that Justin just covered for you is the current estimate, best case, best world scenario, once we are hopefully able to bring on these funding partners. Currently, in the budget you've just approved, there's only $75,000 because we didn't have this information or this level 2 study at the time we developed the budget. So we'll continue working to, as he said, we just submitted some material to NRCS to see if they would be a potential funder. If we're eligible, we'll continue to work with these other entities and hopefully whittle the city's portion down to $200,000, but we will need to come back and budget for that once we understand what our total bottom line is.
Thank you.
Above 75,000, I guess.
City manager, are those budgeted for in the water fund?
Correct, yes.
Council members, any other questions? What is the useful life? This might be a question for you, Justin, but what's the useful life of a diversion dam of the sort we're talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The general useful life of the project will be approximately 50 years. Some of those components might be closer to 25 years. Any of our like metal slide gates, but generally speaking, the design life should push 50 years.
Thank you. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Back to the funding question, Justin, since you talked about 67% from WWDC projected, can you talk about confidence level of that being obtained?
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. We have a few of these projects moving forward where we're introducing, external benefits to irrigation, such as fisheries and fish passage. And on another $2 million project we just had approved up in the Cody region, that grant portion, WWDC reduced down to 50%. And that was partially because we had a bunch of external funding partners committed. But ultimately on that project, that irrigation district is paying zero out of pocket. And so by working with this large group, I think there's a pretty good proven track record that the funding can come through. But again, it's working with the stakeholders early and often, which I think we've been doing a nice job of. And I feel pretty confident that, the other 50% can be raised, especially if the city can contribute around $200,000. And then WWDC, their budget has been getting really tight. I think if we can reduce our ask from the traditional 67 to closer to 50%, we have a much higher chance of being selected or awarded those funds. Mabel, or if Mabel's on the call, she might be able to speak a little better to the overall budget of WWDC.
Yeah.
Mabel, if you'd like to do that, please. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, members of the council, for hearing this afternoon or this evening. Justin is correct that as we're looking at funding these projects, if they are looked at more favorably if there is a higher match. Our office can go up to 75%, but that's pretty rare. Like Justin said, if you can get those to be a 50% grant, they're looked at pretty favorably. The 67% grant, we'd probably have to take a harder look at that. But it just varies year to year with the available funds. So far, we've been pretty fortunate to be able to put a lot of projects on the ground across the state.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions? Councilor Shumway.
I don't think I have been to see this diversion apparatus, but there is one that moves water into, I think, Sodergren Lake that goes into the water treatment plant. How far apart are these two diversion dams that we have along the Laramie River?
Boy, through you, Mayor, Councilor Shumway, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a fair distance as I'm just imagining it in my head. And if Justin knows it off the top of his head, which I doubt he does, but he's welcome to jump in. But there's a substantial stretch of river between those two structures.
And the one that we used to go into the water treatment plant, I think we completed that about 2015, 16?
Yeah, it's not been too long ago. That is correct. Nancy's showing us the aerial. I don't think we even capture the water treatment plant on this aerial.
Okay.
Maybe the other map, Nancy? I think it also doesn't pan out far enough.
Yeah, that's the further out.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. So recognizing that's where the Dallin diversion headgate structure, whatever is, it's much further out, Highway 230 there to the water treatment plant and that other piece. So I'm not sure. Counselor,
Jenny,
we
if
can
I
certainly
may,
check.
I think it's approximately 20 miles or even a little further. So there's a pretty good distance between there.
That sounds about right.
And then one more, in years past, we used to pay Pioneer Canal, I think, a fee every year. That's behind us, correct?
Yes. We're still a member of that irrigation district, of course. But the retention fee, I think it was called, that we paid years and years ago, we've moved past that, yes.
Any other questions, council members? Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to say thanks. This is a lot of work, and it looks amazing so far, and I really can't wait for us to finish this up. So thank you, and thanks for the partnership, and all the other folks that have partnered, or not folks, but organizations and departments. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really been great working with WWC, and Justin's been great to work with on this level 2, and we're looking forward to moving into level 3. It's a long process to get through Water Development Commission funding, but it's a thorough and I don't know, in my opinion, it's a quite excellent public process if we're going to spend these sort of volumes of public money. So we'll keep working with Mabel too over at Water Development to get to the building stage of this whole thing. Mabel, is there anything else you wanted to add, or Justin?
Great. All right.
No, like you said, this has been a really good process working with the city and all the partners that they had, and really commend Darren for getting this project off the ground, and it's been a really positive project on our part.
That's great to hear. Thank you both for taking the time to give us this update this evening, and looking forward to more for sure.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We will move to public comment on this work session. If any member of the public wishes to speak to us, go ahead and come forward or raise your hand on Zoom. Again, it is on this work session. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close that public comment period and close that work session. We'll move on to our next work session, which is the 3rd Street beautification, and recognize the Assistant City Manager to get us started. Good evening, Todd.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. Thanks for having me here tonight. First off, before we get started, I want to introduce some of the folks that have been involved in this project with us. We've got Laura McDermott with Laramie Public Art Coalition, Trey Sherwood with Laramie Main Street Alliance, and then Sam DeRosia is an intern that's been helping us get through some of this work and helping me stay a little more organized on this project as we go through. It's fun to see him work because he gets everything done at lightning speed, because he doesn't have everybody in the city calling him every 5 minutes to say something. So it's kind of interesting. But Nance, if you can bring up our presentation.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It's
Wow.
and it shows you how dysfunctional.
City Manager, we should call you less?
As dysfunctional we get at the end. Yeah. Thank you, Nance. So this presentation is basically based off of Resolution 2023-15. I'm not sure if you all remember, but the Resolution 2023-15 supported the removal of the medians in 3rd Street. It also superseded all previous resolutions, directed staff to work with LMSA and LPAC, and provided about $270,000 with an option to seek additional funding for 3rd Street beautification. As we talk about 3rd Street beautification, there's some things that we've got to remember that are going on. You know, currently we're under a project, we're replacing water lines and going through 3rd Street. And then YDOT comes in, I believe in 2025, is it 2024 or 2025, Janine? 2025, and is going to do full street reconstruction for all of 3rd Street, which I believe is from Boswell clear up to Curtis Street, which is going to be impactful. One of our plans here is to try to capitalize on that and do beautification at the same time and get us caught up. Our goals tonight are to provide you with some information we received from YDOT and to provide council with some clarity as to what YDOT's got planned in their project related to some beautification and some improvements. It's also to get council's thoughts related to beautification and how we proceed. You know, really the process and how we move forward is kind of interesting. So I'm really hoping that council engages with me tonight and talks about it and is open about how you feel about beautification and what kind of processes we'd like to do to make sure that we keep good relationships with our partners as we move through this. First off, a few things about the project that's provided by WYDOT is they're working on bulb outs at lighted intersections. Those lighted intersections that will include bulb outs are Grand and 3rd Street, Garfield and 3rd Street, and then the southwest corner of, let me get this right, Ivinson and 3rd Street, Grand and 3rd Street, the southwest corner of Garfield. And that's where they're planning on some bulb outs. So you're going to see some changes there. You know, bulb outs are similar to what you see in this picture on the bottom left, where you see the bulb out pops out, and then what it makes is a shorter passage for pedestrians, so they don't have to cross the parking lane and the lanes of traffic at the same time. So if parking lanes are roughly 11 feet wide and we have 4, there's 44 feet, plus you have parking for 2 cars at 10 feet wide, you have 64 feet. So instead of trying to cross 64 feet and be out in the pavement, you're only crossing hopefully 44 feet as you're just crossing the parking, and it leads to a little bit improved pedestrian safety. So that's already planned by WYDOT as we go through this. One of the other things that was interesting when we met with WYDOT is Ralph Trango had indicated that he was pushing for some slower speeds. This is an interesting graphic. It's on the Laramie Main Street Alliance, right, Trey? What is it?
Whatever you want to call it.
All right. It's on the LMSA Pinterest board, but as you look at speeds and you think about what you see as you go through, that image on the left is if you're traveling at 30 miles an hour, that's about what you see as you visually move through. You just don't see anything off because you're focusing on the road as you drive. If you slow that down to 15 miles an hour, you can look at what you see differently, what the human eye and the human brain really interacts with. And it's really a neat study that Sam had picked up and was off their Pinterest board that we're going to make sure that we talk about as we go through this. WYDOT is, from Ralph Trango's discussion and a little bit from Ryan Shields, is they're planning on about a 3-block run, which is from Garfield to Ivinson, and they're proposing 20 miles per hour. The lights are already set up to be most conducive for people that travel at 20 miles an hour, which is nice. But that's the space that they're looking at. That will take approval from the local district engineer and the state traffic engineer, but that's one of the things that they are proposing with this project. One of the other things that they're proposing is an enhanced concrete intersection at Grand Avenue and 3rd Street. Grand Avenue and 3rd Street is going to be full concrete, so there's going to be no pavement in the middle. That picture on the left on the bottom is actually out of Sheridan, Wyoming, and that's one that they have proposed that we try to mimic. If you can see, they've got a off-color concrete crosswalk with white thermoplastic bars or painted bars on each side, and then they actually like those little diamonds that you see in the middle of the intersection. One of the things that they talked about with us is all we'd have to do is select the color of concrete. And I can go through and do that, but that's not the way that the city works or the public process is. The public process is to gain information and try to satisfy as many people as you want. That picture in the middle is actually, we use it multiple times because I find that to be very attractive and something that I like, but that's what you would see a little bit more. The picture on the far right is off, again, the LMSA Pinterest board, and that's a stamped pavement product with some thermoplastic. These are interesting treatments. The reason this works at Grand and 3rd is because it's an all concrete intersection. We can do it with colored concrete and not paint or thermoplastic, which reduces the amount of maintenance that you do through there. So closing state highways is very difficult, and doing maintenance on there is very hard to do. So that's planned in there. One of the other things, and this is interesting that I consider this beautification, but signal improvements. If you've looked at the signals at 4th and Grand Avenue, and all the way up Grand, they're brown with a black light fixture on them. That's the bottom right-hand picture that you see there. So they're going to plan on signal improvements all along 3rd Street, and they've given us the option to request a certain color of pole. The pole is thicker. It's a little bit more how we're going to say, dominant in the sky. Lets you know that you're in maybe a different part of the town is what I really like about it. It feels a little heavier as it goes over your head, looks a little bit more ominous as it is on the corner. And, really, color is probably unlimited when you think about steel colors and powder coating. But we have brown that goes all the way from 4th and Grand. I believe it goes clear up to Boulder. I've looked a few times, but they've actually got brown poles all the way through there. And as we go through this downtown on 3rd Street, the question is, what color do people really lean toward? How do we do this? You know, some of the philosophy could be, do you choose all black? Because if somebody scratches it or the paint gets marred, you can fix that with a can of Krylon, black glass Krylon. Or is it better if we go with brown so that we only have 2 different colored poles in this entire town, right? There's a lot of things to think about as we go through. It's a much better pole and much more attractive. So those are the things that YDOT's kind of got planned already related to some beautification and the 321 3rd Street plan. So any questions before I move forward with that?
Council members, any questions at this point, or do you want to just keep going? Okay, we'll keep going. Scratch that. Councilor Shumway has a question.
You said there's 2 colors, there's brown and black. I was wondering if we went with brown and gold, if that would be, anyone would even notice.
I don't know that you would choose 2 colors on the poles. I think that we got to choose maybe just 1 color on the pole. You know, but
Well, I mean, brown, then gold downtown or whatever.
yeah. That's, your city manager would love to have the brown and gold highway.
That conversation.
So as we look at this, you know, the 321 3rd Street plan is really the impetus for not only traffic calming, but there's a lot of pieces. Some of the things, they get addressed through beautification, but they aren't necessarily something that we want to put a lot of emphasis towards as we're talking about beautification, what we're doing. You know, there's increase in pedestrian and bicycle activity. If the traffic is slower and things are nicer on 3rd Street, of course we're going to increase pedestrian safety or pedestrian activity. Bicycle activity on 3rd Street is another question. Should you really encourage bicycles on a state highway that's already tight and constricted and has lots of travel, or should we encourage them to move to 2nd and 4th Street is one of the questions that I really have as we move through. So I don't know that that's super important. What we're really focusing on today is an increased sense of pedestrian safety, additional street trees, public art, street furniture and landscaping. You know, business expansion, a decline in crashes, all coming with improvements. So I don't know that we need to focus on that. And then slower traffic speeds can lead towards beautification because people will see more, right? You'll see the beauty of the buildings or you'll see the beauty of the sides as you go through, and maybe you'll catch some of the murals and stop and stay a while and check it out. And then an increase in sales tax revenue would come with all of beautification. More pedestrian traffic would all come with that. So I chose to maybe focus, and Sam and I, as we worked on this, chose to maybe focus on these pieces. So there we go. So as you talk about increased pedestrian safety, I think that the plan by YDOT is accomplished through slower speeds. It's also accomplished through the use of bulb outs to decrease the amount of distance pedestrians have to pass. You know, one of the things that we need to think about as we do this is the passage downtown isn't just west of 3rd Street. It's east and west of 3rd Street, so we want pedestrians to have good crossing right as they go through there, and so those bulb outs do that. It's also accomplished through an enhanced intersection at Grand Avenue and 3rd Street. So if you think about Ivinson and Grand and Garfield will be some improved intersections that provide for pedestrian safeties. One of the things that I think might happen is that we're kind of we have a chance to miss increasing pedestrian safety or comfort of safety if we can't find a way to enhance the crosswalks at the other intersections, right? We don't necessarily want to funnel everybody to just Grand and 3rd. We would like them to cross as they go through. But that also comes back to the maintenance on the state highway. You know, YDOT might be willing to do whatever we request, but anything we request beyond that is up to city crews to go out and maintain. So let's say we choose to paint the intersection. Well, as that wears off, city crews have to go out and maintain that, which is very difficult to do on the interstate. I have asked Ryan Shields at YDOT to effort other ways to try to make improvements, to make them feel a little bit better than just your normal barred crosswalk, right? Something that makes you feel like you cross a little bit better, and they have talked about that. Enhancement on the state highway are hard to maintain. They're just difficult. We see it on Grand with the medians. It's hard to be up there and working, and I'll go up there and pull weeds with my crews, and it's kind of scary. You got people driving through. Even if you have traffic control out, which we do, directing people to push out in the lanes, they still are going by at 40 miles an hour. It's a pretty scary situation when you're out there. So. One of the other things is increased pedestrian safety. It's kind of neat. This picture on the bottom right is actually Grand Avenue at Shocktoberfest, right? Yeah. Grand Avenue and 3rd Street at Shocktoberfest, and you see how close that truck came to just turning the curb there. And hopefully the bulb outs will push that out a little bit farther, make that turn a little bit different, make the pedestrians feel more safe as they go there. Additional street trees, public art, street furniture, and landscaping. That's where Laura, Trey, Sam, and I kind of focus our attention. These are some pictures. We got Palermo's there, which is a picture of 3rd Street. Right now, 3rd Street's a narrow right-of-way. It's really constricted. There are narrow sidewalks. There are no street trees in there, which I'm told is by YDOT. YDOT doesn't believe that we should be able to allow street trees in that area. So some things come off the table that we can't do. If you look there, the other picture, I can't remember where that's off of, and then that other one is the Bank of the West on 3rd Street that you see as you go through, and that's kind of what we've got going on. This is a picture that I've actually shared around a little bit, is kind of a picture that I like. One of the things that I like about it is it succinctly takes a lot of the government-owned issues and makes them all similar, right? The traffic signal is black, the pedestrian lighting is black, the benches and tables are black. Everything that's kind of government planned is black, and then you have some plantings and some growth. I don't think we're removed from being able to do some plantings, but we do have to be cognizant about some of the things that we look at as we move through. Laura's. Do
you mind taking a question real fast?
Absolutely.
Councilor Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Todd, I was just curious about the bulb outs and the heavy construction trucks. You see them all the time on 3rd Street. How is that going to work when you have those big, heavy trucks?
So the bulb outs actually don't change the turn lane. What they will make that do is it'll make them press out and turn. YDOT's engineers have planned for the truck traffic to be able to make all the turns that they need to make with the bulb outs. Oh, yeah. What the bulb outs do is they hopefully keep the truck from getting in on the pedestrians as they're standing at the corner. So I typically don't see a lot of changes. I've seen, we've got bulb outs going in all throughout the community, and sometimes trucks do drive up over them, but they're able to make those turns, and it's designed that way as it goes through.
Thank you, Councilor. All right, back to you, Todd. Thanks.
So Laura's actually pulled together, and she's been working on gateway treatments, which is one of the things that we look at, and we talk about different gateway treatments. We could do something as grand as doing a large over the 3rd Street type banner like they have in Golden, Colorado. They have these attractive corner pieces that are in another area of the community. One of the ones that I like and I've been a proponent of is changing banners, and that could be done in conjunction, so if you have Jubilee Days going down, you have a banner for Jubilee Days, or if you have homecomings going on, you have a banner for homecoming or something that changes out or goes through as you work through that. Some of the other treatments that we've looked at, and some of these are off the LMSA Pinterest page or off of some of the stuff that Laura's provided. You can do some different things with some pieces. You don't necessarily have to go over the street to make a placemaking or to make gateways. And as gateways come into the community, you can see gateways as you enter the downtown on North 3rd, South 3rd, even coming off Grand, which is one of our entrances into downtown that we need to try to make it feel like bookends as you enter into the community. Again, another picture there in the middle of similar amenities, a black bench with a black pedestrian light pole and the bike rack. I love our colored bike racks. I don't know that I do that, but I would certainly like to get a little more consistent with some of our amenities. This curvy planter box is beautiful. A lot of our right-of-way doesn't lend itself to that, but there's no reason we don't maybe lend ourselves to a thin planter box on the corner like that, that could be used as we go through. And then some more gateway treatments that Laura had provided as we move through. So one of the other things, the 321 3rd Street, slower traffic speeds. I know YDOT's interested in talking about those 3 blocks. Is that 3 blocks enough? Should we ask to extend it out to 7 blocks like I've shown here? That way it would go from Clark to 1 Place Garfield. Is that Custer? It would go Custer to Clark, you know. Do we request something like that as we go through to try to get people to slow down so they see that bigger vision of 3rd Street as they pass through? All right, so that's kind of my talking. Now I'm hoping to listen to council on some various questions here. You know, what would you like to see us support as far as what YDOT's already doing? What would you like to see us request from YDOT? How do we show what we would like to do? Do we come back and do we try to get a resolution in front of council that shows those support? You know, how would council like to see this process move forward? And then I also would love to hear your thoughts on beautification. We would love to hear their thoughts on beautification. You know, how do you feel about gateway treatments? How do you feel about the amenities? You know, if we were to say we want to change all the government amenities, maybe the traffic signals are brown and the pedestrian lighting is black. Are you okay if we just do 3rd Street and then it's a project to replace all the green pedestrian lights to black throughout the entire downtown, which is a long project. It may take us years to get that done. What are your thoughts on the rotating overhead banner type system like you see in Steamboat with their events that go on in that park? And what are your thoughts on government-owned amenity colors? So really, I'd turn it over to you guys and love to hear from you as we go through. Or Laura, Trey, you guys got anything you'd like to ask? Nothing? You sure? Sam? Sam's like, don't make me talk. But
All right. Please leave this slide up so we can reference those questions. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Vice Mayor, please.
I just wanted to comment on the extension of the 20 miles an hour, and I really don't think 3 blocks is enough. And I think it also kind of creates a situation where people suddenly have to slow down, and it could be a place of frequent infraction. Whereas if that 20 miles an hour extends through the downtown, the heart of downtown, I think it really speaks to that they are in downtown Laramie, and that 3 blocks doesn't quite do it. So that would be my...
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Cumbie, I appreciate that comment. I kind of feel the same way. I was actually looking at the comp plan today at Janine's recommendation, and I was reading on, 3rd Street's a principal arterial. I believe that's a term, but it's also in the highway category, and the speeds that the comp plan shows for that are like 40 miles an hour. And I'm actually thankful that YDOT's at least willing to think about slowing it down for 3 blocks, but I kind of lean towards that. Let's request as much as we can get and see if we can get them to really slow it down just for some pedestrian safety as we go through.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman, and then Councilor Richardson.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Awesome. So I just wanted staff to know that I like the bulb outs. It's something that I kind of said that I would try to push for when I was running for city council. As far as like the colors of the poles and stuff, I kind of like a different color for downtown. Like you were saying, it kind of shows that you're in a different part of the city, and maybe we could get some more attraction to downtown as well. And then lastly, I support what the Vice Mayor said. I think we should extend the speed limit, those 7 blocks instead of the 3, because once again, that would help kind of showcase some of those businesses that are downtown. So that's kind of my stance right now.
If I could provide some clarity, we actually won't be able to make that decision on the speeds on 3rd Street, but we can request for them to effort that for us. So
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
So I have a follow-up, follow-up question to the speed issue. What is their reasoning for not extending that, or is there pushback, and why would the pushback be for not extending that a few more blocks?
They felt it, and actually I'm hesitant to say the reason for that. I mean, I know what I've kind of heard, but it's probably not appropriate for me to paraphrase what YDOT has said. I was actually just enthralled that they were doing it for 3 blocks, and I was like, hey, let's talk about extending it. Some of it has to do is compliance, it'll be a compliance issue, but I think it's compliance either way. So kind of hesitant to say that, but we could certainly request it.
Thank you.
And I am in agreement with some of these other things. Are our only colors that we can choose from black and brown? That's my next question.
Did you catch that question, Todd?
I did not.
The only colors that you can choose from black and brown?
Honestly,
Get wild.
yeah, I don't know that for sure. I think that powder coating colors are out there. On the flip side, I like those to disappear. I'd rather you don't see the traffic signals or don't see the pedestrian lights and see them go away instead of them becoming the art and the beauty. But it's a matter of how artistic anybody is.
Councilor Gabriel, Councilor Pierce, Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure, Todd, if you can address this, but there's a piece of private property at 3rd and Grand that's been an eyesore for many years now. Is there anything the city can do to maybe purchase that? Or what are the plans to do something about 3rd and Grand on the south side? Or maybe not address that.
I guess I would offer Mayor, Councilor Gabriel, there have been many conversations with that private property owner, both between the owner and the city, various departments and factions and staff members of the city over the years. I also believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Main Street Director, but I believe there's also been outreach to the property owner from the Main Street group. We haven't made much headway, and it is private property. So, Todd, you're welcome to add whatever you'd like or feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I guess it's.
But we all recognize that there is vast room for improvement.
Honorable Mayor, through you, I've actually met with that private property owner, and unbeknownst to you, I've offered your money to lease it for long terms. I offered to buy it with knowing that I would probably have council support, right? But just haven't been able to get any traction. The lease option for me was I would organize a volunteer group and we'd take that all out and we'd just turn it, quite frankly, I said, I'll just put green turf in there and Adirondack chairs. And then when you want it back or you move forward with something, then we'll get out of the lease. But there's just there's no action. The owner is hard to communicate with and keep communication with.
Thank you for your efforts. Let's see, I'm to Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for your efforts there as well. I like the idea of asking YDOT for an extension on the 20 miles an hour. If it's possible, I think it'd be great if we could get that. I also think about bike crossing, right? And I think there should be some sort of emphasis or acknowledgement of potentially 3rd and Ivinson being a spot where we might actually have more bike or pedestrian movement as opposed to Grand and 3rd. So if we could potentially look at those intersections as well. Because, just like bikes aren't so much going down 3rd, they're probably not so much going down Grand, right? So they could be heading down Garfield and Ivinson. So if we could do something on those intersections, I think that would be nice. And I just think those are more pedestrian friendly-ish compared to the highway intersections. I like it when things match. So black, brown, I don't care, but matching to me is good. And in terms of the overhead banners, personally, I'm not a fan, but that's just me. I don't know. I feel like they almost, I don't know what the word is, but with our wind, and I don't know how windy it is in Golden and some other locations, but, you know, we get some pretty wicked wind, and I would hate to have a problem, right? I mean, although I do like the idea of some sort of cool something at the entrance. I'm not personally sold on the banner that goes across the street, but that's just me. I think I'm the only one so far that mentioned the banner. And I have the utmost confidence in our art folks in downtown because they do a great work. So, I mean, I think they're, you know, I'm glad they're on the team. So, thank you as well.
Honorable Mayor, through to Councilor Pierce. You know, in our discussion today with Janine, we were talking about, you know, if we did make a change on, say, the pedestrian lighting and some of the different things, you know, how would we phase that in? And Janine was actually hoping that Ivinson would be the next piece that we address to create that connection, that university highway into the downtown and encourage that bicycle crossing. If I understand it correctly right now, our bicycle route is on Garfield. And so how the bikes cross or they're encouraged to cross at those intersections is something that might come up on our end to correct, but I would envision that they would come out of the bike lane and maybe then use the lane of traffic to cross there at that point. I don't think there's any bike lanes painted on Ivinson, is there?
I think there are, actually.
Is there?
When we have paint. Yeah.
When we have paint.
Yeah,
But
soon. I think there are, but I think closer to 9th. I'm not sure they go all the way.
I don't think they go all the way down.
Yeah.
I think if we could improve some of that painting and striping or bicycle lane stuff, that we could definitely do some pieces like that.
Well, and I think too, maybe like a sitting area or with the planters, I think that would be nice there.
Do we have tornado going on?
Apparently it's sighting south of Rock River, but there's nothing. It must be too far north of us. We'll watch it. Okay.
So that kind of work on there. I personally like things to match. So to me, if you match up the government amenities, then the buildings become the beauty that you're looking at, right? Is what I would really lean towards. You know, really, I'm excited. Laura, today there's a National Endowment for the Arts grant out there called Our Town that is up to $150,000, I believe, that could be used to help with this project. And so we'll start working towards that because part of the resolution was to seek more funding. And I will tell you right now that we need to seek more funding. First off, regardless if the pedestrian lighting changes colors and becomes a black pole or a brown pole or whatever it does, we have to replace our pedestrian lighting. We're having failures in the ones that are out there. And so things have to happen. We've had one fall on a car already in the downtown. And so we have to do some stuff. What I don't want to do is not start moving forward and be paralyzed if I can't do the entire downtown, right? Let's start somewhere. Let's stockpile the good ones so that when we do start to have failures, we got some replacements. But as we can move forward, we can do some pieces is really where I lean to. One other thing that I was going to say in response to you, Councilor Pierce, but I lost it.
You can come back when you got it.
Oh, the downtown banners. Yeah, those aren't intended to necessarily be the gateway treatments. Those would be probably in addition to gateway treatments and beautification and probably be more centralized into the downtown. The vision that I have for those is when you come into downtown, you know, maybe it's Earth Day and we're celebrating Earth Day or community cleanup, and it would be up in that center of downtown. I actually would hope that it would be managed, the banner system would be managed by maybe one of our partners like Visit Laramie or Laramie LMSA as we go through, but we'll see if we even get to that. I do agree with you. The banners wouldn't stay up full time. They would go up and come down. You probably would have a 2 week before the event and 1 day after the event that they need to come down so that they don't just stay up year round and get ripped to shreds. And then they would be replaced. And they make a lot of pass-through banners that have about 60% wind flow through them that still are able to advertise some things that you're doing.
You know, I'm thinking too, the visitor center being on 3rd Street now, I think something there might be nice as well. Something
To draw people in.
To draw people in and kind of like an event type of calendar or something, or?
Actually, have you seen their new street sign? Yeah, it's magnetic, and it actually changes with their events and with what's going on in town.
Kidding.
It's a really neat design, pretty well put together. I'm pretty pleased with it.
I need to slow down, right? Instead of just drive right by.
Vice Mayor Cumby, to you, and then to you, Councilor Richardson.
Well, I think you've pretty much, I had some comments on the banner, but I would support, I would like to see for the entry an installation of some sort, you know, that really is there. And some of the things that you showed, I thought are very attractive. And then I like the idea of being able to have transitional banners where a banner's up for a function, then it comes down, and then something else is up. Another question I had with said building, I'm curious, I keep looking at that fence thing, and I just wonder, could that really be, could it meet code? Does that meet code? And is there a way to get that fence down through code enforcement?
You know, I've actually visited with staff about that, and at the time, it did actually meet the code, and what was planned and designed was code compliant, and we do quite a few enforcement actions along there as far as cleaning it up or fixing boards and doing some different pieces, but, you know, it's once it's on private property, it's a difficult place for the city to cross over into, you know, and so.
My last comment is going back to the 20 miles an hour, and I think for the 3 blocks, really that just becomes a crossing. It doesn't really invite one to stroll the avenue, but if we had it in the district, then as in Fort Collins, when you're walking down that main street, it would be something where people would actually walk up and down 3rd, which right now, it's so busy and the traffic and huge trucks. I can't wait to get off of 3rd. And so I think an extension would really invite pedestrian traffic and for people to enjoy that avenue as well.
One of the first things that Trey, Laura, Sam, and I did is we actually did a walk of the area, and we started at Clark Street and basically walked all the way down to almost to Sheridan. I think we got to Sheridan, but, you know, it was interesting that really, I think, and granted, some of the traffic is diminished because 3rd Street's closed, but as you were in the tight area, it felt good, but once you got out into the barren landscape around the Moose Lodge or the Montessori school, you know, it felt like you were more out there and less susceptible to meander down that boulevard, whereas if we could slow some traffic, it actually felt like people were zipping by, you know, and felt uncomfortable with some big trucks going by. But I understand exactly what you're saying.
Thank you, Todd. Mike, before I go to you, I'm going to go to Councilor Somerville for her first time. Andy, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. So I just a few thoughts on the conversation. I genuinely like most of the stuff that you guys are talking about. I do, of course, you guys all know me well, want to put a huge emphasis on the public art aspect with the crosswalks and any other piece of that. I think it really is an opportunity for us to help things stand out. And both Delpac and Main Street do phenomenal work. So I know we're in good hands there. One other thought, all of these conversations about crosswalks and some lighting, I think we might want to really think about, although we might not be able to fund and install stuff in the immediate future, but really think about putting an emphasis on what downtown can look like at night and really spending some time with that. We are, you know, a fairly youthful town, and our downtown has continued to gain vibrancy at night, and what we can do in terms of lighting and other items that in that factor, I think could pay dividends significantly for both the community and the business owners. So I'd really encourage some thoughts about what does this look like in the daytime? What does this look like in the nighttime? And the last piece, I really want to just talk about the speed piece, and I'm all for slowing things down and trying to improve all of that. Our sister city in Casper did something similar on 2nd Street, and it was around their hospital for about, I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 blocks. They took it down from 30 to 20. It didn't last a year. They had nothing but problems with enforcement. They had huge differentials in speed. And so they ultimately ended up having to take all of that back out and put it back up to 30 miles an hour. So if WYDOT is considering this, and it's something the council wants to think about, then I think we're going to have to think a little bit bolder than just changing out some speed limit signs. I think that requires digital signage. I think it requires pretty strong notification entering and exiting downtown. And then you got to really make it worth their while to slow down. It would be a huge culture change for driving through downtown Laramie. And if we're going to do it, I want to try to give it the most successful opportunity, or the best opportunity to be successful, I guess I should say. So I don't think it's just as simple as, great, let's make it 20 miles an hour. And I don't think personally I would be supportive of anything less than 20. I don't think 15 is plausible. But I really think, again, it might be just a little bit more work and a little bit more expensive than maybe what we are anticipating to make that successful. So I would encourage those conversations with WYDOT and try to make sure they're on board with, at the very least, some very bright digital signage so that we're actually catching people's eyes and we're refocusing that attention, whether it's 3 blocks or 7 blocks. I think you start to have problems at 7 blocks. I think that's too long to ask somebody to go 20 miles an hour through downtown, especially because it is a main north-south thoroughfare and we don't have a good alternative for people to just be able to go 30. But whatever that conversation is, I guess I just want to encourage us to think just a little bit more about actually being successful and not just being frustrated in a year when residents are mad at us because they changed the speed limit and it's not working, and police officers are frustrated because they're seeing more accidents, or, you got people going 20, you got people going 30 or 35 like they do right now. I don't know. Just seems like it requires a little bit more thought. But for everything that's on there, I do agree with the assistant city manager in that whether we're talking about getting started on lighting or doing something, we need to start somewhere and actually start doing things, even if we can't, if we can't eat the whole apple at one time. We need to start somewhere. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Somerville. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. I have a question regarding kind of those entryway points. From my understanding, having something that is like golden that goes clear across your road is substantially more expensive than an installation. Is that correct?
Actually, what we're finding, that's a really good question. Which is precisely why we're doing a lot of research on what other communities have done. Actually, that's not true. It doesn't necessarily mean it's more expensive. We've seen price ranges between like $90,000, like Reno, Nevada has an overhead that says Reno, up to like $2 million. So it's really, it kind of just depends on what the project ends up being. But no, it doesn't mean that it's more expensive. It might mean that it's more work with WYDOT in terms of engineering that piece, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be more expensive.
I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Councilor.
So from your professional perspective, bang for your buck wise, installation versus Like
the overhead. I guess it depends on what the installation is, right? I think there could potentially be something really, really striking that is on either side of the street that maybe even goes the entire way down, right? We can pull it all the way through the district. We've talked about like lighting treatments and what that could potentially look like. So there might be something maybe more dynamic that is on either side rather than going overhead. But, you know, personally, for me, like going to Golden, Colorado is really fun because there's that overhead sign, right? It's so cute. But I think it just really depends on what we kind of figure out overall too, of like what the whole aesthetic of the street ends up being, and how we can incorporate artwork along with that. It also will depend on the budget that we have, obviously. You know, right now it's $270,000. We are going to go after an Our Town grant. Hopefully we could get another $150,000, which would be amazing. But you know, an art project could eat up that entire budget, but also lighting could eat up that entire budget. And so we are going to have to look at all of those things together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor.
I had two questions. I just wonder, being a state highway, are there certain restrictions and requirements for height and things like that?
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Cumby, there's a overhead program with YDOT that has all those restrictions, and I think it's 18 feet clearance if I remember correctly, but yeah. And then if you think about it, as you go up, then you work on structure, you have to think about wind loads and weight and foundation pieces as it goes through, you know, so yes.
This is just a comment. I want to say I appreciate the presentation, and one of the things that I appreciate about the planning is the integration of aspects of both art and aesthetic improvement. And I think that's really important because aesthetic improvement then highlights the art and the art highlights the others. So I like the combination and the aesthetics of the project, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Somerville, I see your hand is still up, and then to you, Councilor Shumway. Councilor Somerville, if you have another question, it is your turn.
Mayor, I don't, and I apologize. It doesn't say that my hand's raised on my end. So let's chalk that off to a Zoom glitch.
You got it. Councilor Shumway, and then back to you, Councilor Newman on Zoom.
I just want to say some things about entryways. Obviously, we have 4, and we can't do much with 4. But here's my thoughts. Golden, that's nothing spectacular, but people relate to that. I think about, you know, one community has an archway of antlers. And I don't like that. I think that's hideous. Another hideous thing is if you drive into DIA, there's this great big huge blue stallion, which is okay, but it has these scary red eyes. Now, I think Laramie, Wyoming, places, you know, nationwide, Laramie and Cheyenne are notable because just that we're the West. But I think if we had a giant steamboat as we come out of Telephone Canyon, and Steamboat is there, that's the symbol of Laramie, Wyoming. And if it was big enough and obvious enough for everyone that came in, they'd say, we're in Laramie. So that's just a thought. I think we need to have something that is, you know, noticeable, and it's something, you know, we can just feature the downtown, but that's not Laramie. That's just a portion of Laramie. But if we had a symbol of Steamboat, the bucking bronco, which, you know, we see it everywhere. It's on pins and keychains and T-shirts and license plates and everything. That is the symbol of Laramie, Wyoming. And I would love to spend not have us spend, but somebody donate $2 million and get a giant steamboat as we come out of Telephone Canyon, because I'm in Laramie.
Honorable Mayor, I can appreciate those comments, but I also would direct it back that the 321 3rd Street and the beautification is mostly related to just that 3rd Street corridor that we're working on. Fred Oakers, we had lots of fun discussions in the short time that I got to work with him, but he wanted to use the Union Pacific Tower, those smokestacks, and wanted to have a big lighted steamboat up on those so that when you came into town, you saw those at night. And so I thought that was a fantastic idea, but it's hard to get stuff like that through Union Pacific.
Anything to add back there? Okay.
So just to add on to that, I love that idea of bringing something iconic, and something that means something to the community, which is part of the public art process is that we'll get to ask the community and bring people's voices into it to say what they want to celebrate, right? So it might be a steamboat, but it might be something else. But that's what's so great about that process too. And we were going to build that into this entire plan, right? Is that we're going to work with the community. So what comes out of that is reflective of Laramie in a really unique way. So that's what I wanted to say.
That was a good note. Thank you, Laura. We're going to go to Councilor Newman on Zoom.
Mayor, I changed my mind. Everything's been said that I wanted to say by other council members.
I appreciate that, Councilor. By way of a comment, if everybody else is done, I think for whatever it's worth, one of the things you mentioned was bike lanes. That came up in our goal-setting conversations, and I think it would be valuable for the council. I tend to agree that maybe bicycling on 3rd Street is not where we would. Certainly you can ride with the cars if you want, but it's not where I would choose to ride myself. But I think we could have a little more robust plan for where and how those bicycles travel on maybe 4th or 2nd, Garfield, Ivinson, whichever streets we use. And that feels like maybe a really worthwhile task for the Traffic Commission. I know it's of interest to many of the members of the Traffic Commission, and they certainly have some expertise that I don't have in this world. I can tell you that sure, I'd like to ride my bike down Ivinson and I'd like a protected bike lane, but I also don't know where I'd go from there. So having some folks spend a little more time on that would be helpful, but I do think it should integrate into this plan as best we can. And I tend to agree with the slowing down traffic. I think it makes sense for it to match our downtown district if we can. I think the sort of north-south length of the district makes sense. And then to Councilor Somerville's point, I think the being bold part stuck with me, but I think we could be bold in a different way than, to me, digital signs sets us up to sort of like we started knowing we were going to fail because we just wanted them to be ready to go back to 30 right away and to be out nothing when it happens. And I think there would be some value to public sort of like public education campaigns around this, but we all drive through towns all the time that we didn't get any sort of like education on how to follow their speed limits. We just saw the signs. There is a system in place for us knowing what speed we should go. And so taking that as one end of it, and then the second end of it being that it is probably true that we will need to change culture to some extent. But I think we might do that with this beautification idea and some sort of like traffic calming measures rather than just like some sort of like physical traffic calming. And whether that's, bulb outs, pushing things a little narrower, things like that. I think one thing that's distinct between when you mentioned that you walk between I think you called it the barren landscape. I used to walk that all the time because I lived at 4th and Sheridan and would walk downtown most days. And the thing that always stuck out to me is there's no parked cars on that section of it. And so it's not just that there's not heavy usage on the edge, so you don't have cars either. So you don't have that sort of like physical barrier. But also cars are almost certainly traveling faster because they're not pressed by cars and worried about like, ooh, I'm next to a semi and a bunch of bar cars. That's never the case Garfield to Ivinson, right? So having some sort of thought as far as how we calm that traffic, if we're going to extend it, I think is worthwhile. And then, I think with the intersection, and sorry, I'm just throwing I just made a list as we were going, so sorry, I'm just talking at you. But I think with the intersection, the 3rd and Grand intersection, one thing that stuck out to me is that's a cool opportunity to be able to do something a little more robust that we don't have to maintain all the time. But that also feels like a very, it's consequential and should certainly go through the public art process. I mean, I think we may come up with something, to Laura's last point, that none of us would have dreamed up. I'm not going to tell you what to put there because I won't know. I would rather the community tells us what to put there, or so at least selects an artwork, and maybe we get something that is just uniquely Laramie and truly us. That's the heart of the town. If you had to pick one intersection, that's it. So if we could do something special there that's robust enough and sort of easy enough for us to repair if we had to replace a section. I don't know what the guardrails would be on an art call like that, but it seems possible. And I think that's the part that makes Laramie cool to me, is the little, the surprise things about Laramie, these little moments of creativity or these little moments of community that pop up in a place you didn't expect them. To me, that is the part that I love. And so I think if we can lean on that could be beneficial to this whole project. I thought I was going to tell you that I want brown posts. I honestly don't know that I have a strong opinion of this. I just thought if they match, cool. But then Micah said they should all be different colors, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of cool too. Sorry, when you said it, that's what went in my mind. I thought that'd be kind of fun. Just day glow everything. So I don't have a strong opinion there. I kind of changed my mind, but that's really, I guess, all I have to say. Other than the Shocktoberfest owners should hear what we're saying. Should know the council's interested in your piece of property. Please sell it to us. And yeah, that's all I got. Council members, anything else?
I just want to say thank you for the process. And when I visit other towns around the state, our public art is always brought up, our murals, as a thing about this community. So to capitalize on what's already here, and when I'm thinking about that entryway, it isn't the arch that says Golden, because I think we have some real opportunities to continue to build on that art culture. So thank you for your work, all of you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Todd, anything you'd like to wrap up with?
One more thing is, as I think about process, I think it might be better, and that would lean on Janine, potentially a resolution that council approves for us to request some certain action from YDOT. Does that seem too much, or is it?
I think it memorializes it, keeps everybody on the same page.
Okay. Some kind of resolution that council supports these actions and would request efforts in these areas so that we can do that, so we can work on that. The other thing is that, as I think about the process, as much as I believe I can design and engineer anything myself, I don't know that we can on this. And so Trey's brought up maybe reemploying community builders to do an update to the 321 plan to try to see if some listening community sessions, and then how do we actually make the decisions as we go through. And I think maybe just by keeping council apprised as we go through the different processes might be the best bet to try to get to where we need to go. And if anybody has any suggestions on that, I'd love to hear it.
Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, no, I don't have a suggestion, but I'm just thinking timeline. So if YDOT comes in summer of 2025, is it a one-year project or a two-year project? It's a one-year project for YDOT?
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, if I can add, YDOT does not plan to have full street closure, so traffic will still move through on 3rd Street, and it is planned to just be a one-year project.
So when we think of potential art or amenities, or does it happen at the same time, or do we come in after, or just does it depend on what it is?
Honorable Mayor, through you, I actually believe that the work that we're talking about as far as, amenities and artwork and stuff can actually happen ahead of schedule, or with it, or after it, depending on how we do this. Councilor Somerville brought up, we don't have a lot of funding right now. And the amount of funding we're talking about, Laura had mentioned it, one block just to replace the pedestrian lighting is about $28,000. as it sits now. So let's say we do 7 blocks, there goes a significant amount of money, or let's say we do 10 blocks, there goes even more. The entire 270 is spent. So there's some idea about how we do this and how the funds work, how we get it done,
Thank you.
But I do believe that they can happen now, they can happen with it, can happen after it, can all be in conjunction.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager. And certainly gateway enhancements is something that the council members hear a lot about from constituents. I think this is a sort of a perennial issue, and it will be nice and very welcome to get some movement to get started on it. I think we will all be happy to see this start to take shape.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody else that joined for this. And Sam, good to meet you. For sure. All right, we will go to the public on this work session. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the City Council can come on forward or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Mr. Montoya, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Paul Montoya. Mayor, council members, you knew I'd have a comment, didn't you? I'd like to show my appreciation to Assistant Manager Feeser and the folks that put together this plan. I think it's very exciting to see something happening in this part of town, and I think it'll be exciting to see what develops. I hope we can look at this as a multi-year plan that we want to put together for this. A couple comments about the plan. I love the idea of the bulb outs. I think it's going to look great. I do have the same concerns that I think the mayor and councilperson Pierce have as far as bicycle traffic. Also, we got to remember we have electric scooters now. Having ridden downtown with my grandson a couple times this last week on scooters, it is something to keep in mind as we're traversing, even if we're not on 3rd Street, as we're crossing 3rd Street or crossing Grand. I hope we can keep that in mind during this. As far as the banners go, I see where we're wanting to go with the rotating banners, and I think it's neat to highlight events. However, I will say that when I travel to different cities around the state and they have the overhead banners, it's very distracting when you're driving, especially if you're unfamiliar with town. So I think from a safety standpoint, the placement of those, we really need to keep in mind where they're going, and if they're in heavy congested areas downtown, it might be difficult to really read those and still pay attention to traffic. So keeping that in mind. Entry gateways, I've seen some incredible ones. One of the ones that didn't come up, and I think some people consider it maybe a little gaudy, is the one in Afton. If you haven't seen that one, Google that later and see what they've done in Afton. It's quite amazing. And I do think that it doesn't matter whether it's an overhead gateway entry or something that is just getting your attention, letting you know you're going downtown. I think the goal is to get it to where people will pull over and want to take a picture next to it, because that's what people remember. If you Google most towns that have gateways like Golden, that's a lot of times the first picture that comes up on Google or any social media. So I'd like to see us keep that in mind. And then the last thing is that I hope we can remember as we do this, that we tie this, 3rd Street's not all on its own. We really have to go all the way from 1st Street, 2nd Street, and through 4th Street, and make sure that we have some continuity in that. What they've just recently done in Cheyenne with the Bronze Project that they just dedicated this last week is really pretty incredible, and quite honestly, they copied Sheridan on it. Sheridan had already done it years before, but something unique I think is going to be really kind of cool to be able to do. So I look forward to see what we come up with and encourage you to continue to support the project.
Thank you, Mr. Montoya, and we appreciate you taking time out of your evening to be with us. Any other members of the public wish to speak to the council on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment period, and we have completed that work session. Council members, we will move on to council updates and council comments. And I'm going to start over here. Council Chairman, do you have any of either?
I do. Let me give you an update on the WAM Summer Convention in Cody, Wyoming. There was about 300 attendees to that, and it was very well done. Let me just go over also. There's 12 resolutions that we all voted on. We agreed that we were going to support all of them. Five failed, and just like I said I would, I voted for all 12 of them, and 5 failed. One thing I want to just kind of tell you the ones that failed, just so you know. One that failed, that was failed by one vote, was the decriminalizing marijuana that Jackson put forward. Another failed was there was a suggestion to take the sales tax and 50% for municipalities and 50% for the state. That failed. And the reason it failed is because they said, you know, it would be great for cities like Cheyenne and Laramie and big cities, but the problem is they thought that if we made that redistribution, then the formula that they have for direct distribution would go away. And so they said, we can't take that chance. Not that that would happen, but that was just a fear. And I think that drove everyone to vote no on that one. Another one that failed was on the let's see. Well, medical marijuana failed. There was the town, I think the town of Hartville, I believe. Anyway, they wanted to take city property that they gave to a medical facility and then make it non-taxable, no sales tax. And I think it would have passed if they hadn't gone on, if the mayor of Hartville or whoever it was hadn't gone on for 30 minutes. People got tired of it and said, let's kill this one. But anyway, that was one where they said, here's the problem. If the city has property and they sell it, how do we know when they're not doing sweetheart deals to Cousin George and Aunt Sally? You know, how do we know that maybe there's not a developer that has given campaign contributions to city council members so that he'll get that free property and that property and all that? So anyway, that one went down in smoke. And there was one more that failed, and that was the one on. Oh, by the way, that one that was properties being sold was for affordable workforce housing. And that everyone was in favor of, but they just didn't like the idea that they said, sell it to the, for example, if you're going to do workforce housing for schools, sell it to the school district. So someone doesn't come in, buy a house, and get a sweetheart deal, the land for free, and then turn around 2 years later and sell it and make $200,000. So they said, we got to keep it to where someone's not taking advantage of that. The other one was, no property tax on medical facilities. And I don't know why that one failed, but it did. And it was just one where I think they said, let's keep the sales tax where there's a formula for both the county and the city for that. So the rest of them passed, and we'll see what happens, because now they go, on a menu from the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, go into committees, and we'll see if they ever get out of there. Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, so was there any discussion regarding the retail liquor license at a market value?
Yes, and that passed.
And
that one passed because they thought that it was, they go in and buy a license for $1,500. It's worth $250,000 or $500,000 as soon as they walk out the door. They still want to have market value for the communities, and that's going to go on. That may, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
But that one passed.
Yeah, good.
And then also there was training, very good training. Joe Coyne, who does training, he did all the training on the audit. So if you were there, you don't have to, I'm trained now, so I don't have to take the classes you do. But here's something else that WHAM is doing. They're going to have online for everyone to go in and do that training online. Another thing, the attorney for WHAM said they cannot, if you have somebody that says, they're not going to force me to do anything. I'm not going to take those stupid classes. I'm not going to do the training. You can't force me to do it. Before, the state said, we will remove you for malfeasance, and they said you cannot, and you probably can't. So anyway, you've just got to make sure everyone gets that training so that by this time next year, when they come in to look at it, the one thing that they can do and they will do is withhold funding to the community. So we've got to get that training so we can all say that we've done it. And I think we'll have that well underway soon.
Is that IT training or is that a different training?
This is a training that's not available to you yet online. It is a training for elected officials. We all are required to take trainings now.
Anyone that handles money.
Yeah.
Our boards.
And we can go, the city clerk has more information on this if that's helpful.
Wham was saying by the end of the summer, they're hoping to have the online course available. You do have to take the course and then a short test at the end to show that you have
Listen.
Yeah, that you understand what it is that you've been, the material you've gone over. And part of that is just meeting information, what's required to hold a public meeting, but then also, budget information and things to that nature. So it covers a lot of different categories.
And it is required by July 1.
Of next year, yeah.
So yes, please, council members, take that. Don't be the test case for whether or not you can be removed.
And for planning purposes, they do plan to offer it again also at the Winter WHAM conference. So in January or February of this next year, they'll have that available again in person.
Check it out.
Great.
Mayor, isn't that why we have Jen Wade and her staff?
Jen could train us in 2 hours. This one that we're going to do online is 12 hours. So. No, I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's going to be, it's very thorough. One other thing that I think, well, you probably should know this. They invited Rock Springs to come, so it would be 99 of 99. They did not attend, did they? I don't think they attended.
Yeah.
So we're going to withhold all of their money that comes from the state to them until they come into the fold.
Good luck.
Anyway, it was, another thing is, I was they extended my term to 25 or something like that as on the board for Region 1, so I got that extension. And what else should we report on the convention?
We went to a workshop with some legislative representatives, one of them being Trey Sherwood, and the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the Senate.
Right.
I don't know if you want to share some information about that, but some of the interesting topics of that were getting the youth involved, and some recommendations about that. But then also they really encouraged all the communities to reach out to your representatives, get to know them now before we get into legislative session so that they have an avenue to reach out to the communities for information on the different topics that are hitting the floor. Because we are the boots on the ground, we're the people that are affected day to day, with what's happening. And so it's helpful to build those relationships before the session starts. So they just highly encourage that.
The Speaker of the House and the Senate President said this. He said, we see those brown name tags. That's what the county commissioners wear. He said, we see those all the time, but we don't see very many people from the municipalities that come in that talk to us. So we had a short discussion in the Board of Directors meeting. I said, we need to have gold. So there's brown and gold name tags. So every time someone from the 99 municipalities come in, they say, well, there's somebody from Riverton, there's somebody from Laramie. And I think that that's going to be a push. Also, there's another big push to get people that have either served or have municipal interest to run for the Senate and the House of Representatives. We're very poorly represented as far as municipalities. There's a real county commissioners, for some reason, are very well represented in the House and the Senate, but not the municipalities. So that's something that hopefully we can move towards. I will tell you this: the Senate President and the Speaker of the House are very very much in our camp. They are very supportive of municipalities, but they say sometimes we're our own worst enemies, because when these issues come up, they don't even get texts or emails from us, and if they do, they're cut and paste and they just delete them. So if you just do a personal note when there's an issue that comes up, so that's powerful. We look at those and it make a big difference. So we've got our work cut out. We need to be more connected to the House, to the state legislature, and let them work for us instead of always complaining that, you know, this is wrong and that's wrong. Say, how can we work together?
Counselor, Mayor, if I could, Counselor Shumway, I thought it might be worth mentioning from the Board of Directors meeting, the work that WHAM is having a consultant do to evaluate revenue to municipalities and working with some of the state data. It's preliminary now, but they are engaging a consultant to update the municipal finance report that was last updated a number of years ago. And that's starting to look like some pretty interesting information, but it's certainly not finished yet, but it will definitely potentially strengthen our ability to make good arguments to the state about funding to cities, and also maybe some funding autonomy for cities. And you can add anything else, Joe. I just thought that was, I was only at the Board of Directors meeting, but I think that's a good effort.
Thank you, City Manager.
Also, for your information, we now have 2 representatives. Our city manager represents all of city managers on that board, and then I'm in Region 1. And I think we, you know, we have a group that listens to us. And so, you know, and they see us as kind of leaders in a lot of things that go on in the state.
Thank you, Councilor Shumway. You are on a real brown and gold kick this evening. I like it. It's good. And congratulations on extending your term on the board. We sure appreciate it. I mean, it took us a number of years to get back on, and so thank you for doing that. Councilor Pierce, any updates?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. None from me. Go to you, Vice Mayor.
Let's see. The Albany County Mental Health Board, we met, and I provided an update to the board regarding our activities, such as the chief's proposal related to telehealth, our supporting the diversion grant, and the upcoming, or we did it now, Police Community Relations Board. And they were very positive and excited about the work that we're doing. The sheriff reported that they're continuing with the critical incident training. Also, the chief has provided data to Claire White, and her plan is during the summer, when she can really focus, that she's really going to work with that data, and hopefully sometime this summer we'll be able to get a report on that and begin to query questions to the data. Last night there was a meeting for the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission had requested that the Planning Department prepare a report on the brownfield sites, status update, and development potential. And Mr. Tini put together a very informative and interesting presentation that I believe would be useful for council to see as well. It was thought-provoking, it was a good report, and gives us some ideas about potential development on some of these sites. And last of all, just briefly, I was invited and attended the Wyoming Disability Assistance open house. And their open house today was to try and help the community realize that people are back in the office, they're, post-COVID and doing service. And we had some really good conversations about ways that they might collaborate with our disabilities advisory group. If we had any questions related to research, things like that. So they're very willing to work with us more closely if we want. And I made some good connections there. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Sharon, was that this? The Wyoming Independent Living on 3rd Street today?
Yes.
I went to that also.
Did you?
Very good. Yeah.
It was good. I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. I'm infamous for that.
Just a quick update with potentially DDA and Main Street are talking about an update, kind of a refresh to the 10-plus-year-old downtown plan. And so looking at what that might look like and kind of working together to kind of reevaluate that plan, 10-plus-year-old plan. I don't think I said year-old, sorry. And a few other things happening with tackling some issues with downtown. I also attended last week Leadership Wyoming's Academy, and which is a new program of the group, and the focus that the entire group is looking at right now is housing. And so hoping to learn from other communities, and I think I shared with you all the research that just came out from the Business Council, so on some of their findings. So that was interesting as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gabriel, please.
Councilor Shumway and I will interview a couple of candidates this week for the Tourism Board. Also gave a speech to the Oddfellows State Convention on Sunday, and a member of that is a former Laramie employee, Greg Simpson, and I expressed to Greg, who served over 40 years in the street department, my appreciation for his great service. And that was really a very interesting discussion. He wanted to know a little bit more about what was happening with the city, but Greg is just an outstanding employee, and it was nice to see him at that convention. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. One more from the Vice Mayor, and then to you, City Manager.
I also attended the Laramie Beautification Committee, and it was a good meeting, attended by LPAC, by Laramie Downtown. We did approve supporting the purchase of the tree and planting of the trees, the new trees downtown. We also approved the $12,000 toward the public art that will go out in front of City Hall. And we are working to revitalize membership, where some members that represent various agencies and organizations are not in attendance. So we're going to make contact and try to revitalize the membership so that it's more dynamic. And so that was pretty much it, but that spending then pretty much cleans them out for this year. And so then we're looking more toward what the budget would be next year, and they will be applying for their grants, et cetera. So
thank you.
Thank
Vice
you.
Mayor. City Manager.
Council, I just wanted to give you an update. I don't always do this, but I wanted to update you on the International Town and Gown Association Conference, which was in Fort Collins last week. I was able to attend that, as was Chief Brown. For the city, there were a number of county representatives there, as well as university representatives. Really great conference. I wanted to go to this conference for 10 years, but it's all over the country. And having it so proximate to Laramie and Fort Collins last week was just phenomenal. I wanted to mention a couple things. I think Sheriff Applehans was there, as was Chief Brown. They were able to, I think, focus their time and energy going to some of the sessions surrounding student wellness, mental health wellness, support for mental health calls for services, co-responder models, just a really big point of discussion in the country largely, but especially in university towns. I will tell you, I had we've been having a conversation for the last few months locally about how to maybe create, how to re-envision our own town and gown group into a more functional, high-functioning advisory board with maybe a broader scope of work underneath them. And so the chief, myself, and Todd Fieser had been talking about that already, and I was able to go to a session there that was just really inspiring, and I think gives us a clear blueprint forward on how to get to a more high-functioning and multi-varied town and gown advisory board. So I was able to share some of that information with university folks that were at the conference last week, and I hope that we will kind of just go gangbusters to revamp our approach and make it more broad-based. Also, some really great sessions on strategic planning, like from the University of District Columbia, and how they in DC strategically plan for development and growth of the community. That was very good information. And then I attended a couple really good sessions about off-campus students, how to engage them better, ingrain them better into the community, to support them, support the community. How do you norm behaviors as part of that community building and expectations for being a productive community member in your city where your university is? So that was really good. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I'm coming back sort of refreshed and excited about the potential for our Town and Gown Advisory Board to just really be better working for us. And then I also wanted to share that last week also, we were receiving a number of proposals for haying services for the season out on the Bath Ranch. And so we sort of had to pull, we really didn't think we'd get maybe one or two, but we ended up with 3 or 4, 5, I can't remember now, 5, 4. So myself and Ranch Supervisor Phil Zimmerman, we pulled together an impromptu review committee, trying to sort of replicate the fairness processes that we would use for an actual hard bid for construction services, even though it's not necessary. And so we were able to work with 2 of the members of our Ranch Advisory Committee and Councilor Pierce as the liaison to the Ranch Committee to help Phil and I work through those proposals and select someone to provide haying services this summer. So we did that, but it was something that we had to do quickly because we need to get under contract because hay season is fastly approaching. Anyway, so I wanted to make you aware of that. We have selected a contractor to put up the hay, as they say, and then also to potentially broker that for us on the open market to get the best price. And if you have any more questions, you can always call me if you want to talk more about hay, or call Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. All right, council members, on to agenda review. Do any council members have, go ahead and give this a once over if you'd like.
I know.
Yeah, I think there is not.
It could be a record.
There is only one new item, council members, beyond the consent agenda. And I think maybe there's a chance that we'll have a YDOT letter if that happens in time, if it's timely. But otherwise, nothing that should surprise you. Any questions, concerns? Please,
On the
microphone if you don't mind, Joe.
When we introduced the curmudgeons, I think we also need to, I know it's a proclamation for them, and they'll be here to receive that. There are, including Todd Fieser and Scott Hunter and Mike Malloy, I think that we need to also recognize how much they have done. This group just continues to serve the city in so many powerful ways. So I just want to make sure that we don't forget that's the glue that keeps them together. So,
Sure.
great group.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. I'll be sure to do that. Any other questions, concerns, council? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.